This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Block Chavez. I am the current chair of the State Bar of New Mexico's Young Lawyers Division. And today is our first virtual lunch with the judiciary. And I am excited to have New Mexico Supreme Court Justice David Thomson joining us. How are you, Justice Thomson?
Very well, Allison. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and start and just do a quick introduction of the justice, and then I've got some questions prepared. We have some people also participating, and so they might have some questions as well as we get going.
Sure.
So Justice Thomson received his bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University and his Juris Doctor from the University of Denver. He then clerked for the New Mexico Federal District Judge Bruce Black. He spent many years working at the New Mexico Attorney General's office and then entered into private practice. He was appointed to the first Judicial District Court in 2014 and then was appointed to the New Mexico Supreme Court in 2019. Justice Thomson, I realize I don't know what kind of areas you worked in private practice.
Well, it's interesting, as I'm sure many of you are discovering when I was I was a district court judge, and I was appointed by Governor Richardson, and then someone ran against me and beat me and sort of forced me into private practice. And as you all are probably aware, those of you that do it, you're sort of like a building contractor. You're just taking whatever work you can get. So so you're trying to do wills, trusts and estates. You're doing guardianship, some real estate work. I did some hearing officer work, and then it sort of gradually, because I'm from this area, started to develop more into a plaintiff's personal injury practice. But it was me and a paralegal, and it was a wonderful experience. I will say, quite frankly, one of the better things to happen to me was losing that election. It gave me a different perspective. I'd been with the state, I'd been with the AG for so long before that, and then a judge. I think it's important to have judges that have some sympathy for those that are out there in private practice. And so I think it was a great experience. I benefited.
Well, I know as a practitioner, just having district court judges that have a diverse experience because I know I've had a recent experience with a couple of district court judges that they have never had an adult guardianship case. And so I know it's difficult when they don't know or aren't super familiar with those areas of law. So I appreciate that you have a diverse background. So what made you want to become a trial judge?
I sort of developed that interest when I was a law clerk. I had a very good mentor in Judge Black, who was a federal district court judge from Santa Fe, sat mostly in Albuquerque. He was in the old gold office before they built the new courthouse, and then I think he finished up here. And I think everybody has, so I went from that, I went to the AG where I was an advocate for the state. I was a deputy AG. I was a trial attorney. I was in court all the time. I argued a lot of cases in the New Mexico Supreme Court and fortunate enough to go to 10th Circuit. And I enjoyed being an advocate. And at some point you realize, maybe you're a better neutral than an advocate. And you just kind of come to that realization. I think both roles are important. But I enjoy looking at both sides of the issue and making decisions based on that. So it was sort of my formative experience, and I know, Allison, you've been very helpful in me trying to get this externship program going, and we're gonna do it. But one of the reasons I think it's important, even for externships, is to give lawyers a sense of what it's like to be a neutral, and I enjoyed it. I was just fascinated. I like the human dynamic. I was fascinated by juries and how they interacted with attorneys and the different strategies attorneys used. So that's what made me decide to put my name as a trial court judge.
So you were at the district court for 4 or 5 years, and then you got the appointment by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham to be the New Mexico Supreme Court. So what about the Supreme Court, where you're doing appellate law and you're doing a lot of administrative work for the courts? What made you want to make that change?
Well, you should ask me that question before I came up here, Allison. I mean, I wouldn't have. I mean, I joke about it, but people talk to me, and they want to. It's sort of this. Some people think it's sort of a natural progression, right? And I tell people you really need to think about why you want to do it, especially taking the appellate posture, number one. And number two, one of the greatest differences is now you're one of five, whereas at the trial court, you're used to sort of making decisions, making them quickly, and now everything slows down. But, there's a reason for that. You're the last word. You have to get it right. Sort of collective thought is good. So I loved being a trial. I mean, anybody that wants to be a trial court judge, please reach out to me. I love doing it, especially in the first, because of the venue situation in New Mexico. We get a lot of very interesting cases. We get a lot of litigation against the state that is interesting. We get big product liability cases. I was on the civil bench. I did a little bit of criminal. And I loved it. The problem was the dockets are so big. There's a point in your career, you begin and you end. You begin your career in law school where you're really able to think about issues deeply. You clerked for Justice Michael, right? Allison, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a chance to do it there. And then you go into practice and you're kind of on the treadmill. You're not able to give deep thought to much. And then trial court, it was my experience every now and then. I'd say, I really wish I could give more attention to that subject. And that's what I love here, is you can drill down and really investigate issues. But to your point on the administrative, it is I don't think people understand how big an obligation it is here. We do not have an infrastructure. We're not like the governor's office that has DOH and DPS. We are it. So, for example, all this COVID stuff, there's 5 of us meeting calls every morning trying to sort things out as it goes and sort of dividing tasks up. So the administrative burden is huge. And then, of course, we have, the disciplinary side of it, which is also weighs on you pretty heavily because you're making decisions with regard to people's livelihood. And going back to my original point, being in private practice, you know how hard it is out there trying to meet deadlines, talk to clients, and make sure they understand everything. So but I've really enjoyed it. It will be nice when this crisis is over and we can get back to opinions and things we should be doing.
So on that, I had Brianna Contreras, who's an attorney in Santa Fe. She had a question about how you're adapting to running your office with COVID-19. So I'm not sure. She might mean just running it generally, like working with clerks, or just maybe the changes that the justices have to make in trying to address these issues?
Yeah, well, Brianna, nice to see. I only see her, I think, every Judicial Nominating Commission. Usually she's on those with me. But so I'll talk about the sort of the court globally and then how I've operated. We've made a lot of changes. We've had to adjust. Um, what I've told people is two things. One is we never shut down. We never, you don't see us, the courts are reopening. We never shut down, and we can't. And I know there's a lot of interest out there, for example, and concern about us with rolling out jury trials. And, we're going to be cautious. We're going to be safe. We're going to do things the right way. But we also understand, I don't know, there were 4 shootings in Albuquerque last week. I mean, people are getting arrested. Domestic violence is happening. Commercial disputes are occurring. And we have to keep the judiciary going at some level. We were first confronted with the emergency things like arraignments and dangerousness hearings. I was assigned sort of the technology side to develop a technology platform where judges could communicate with correction facilities and practitioners could dial in. I think prior to our call, there was a gentleman from 13. We've had to figure out how to get the judicial partners on a similar platform so they can appear, and at the same time make sure we protect the constitutional rights of the accused and the victims, make sure there's public access to these hearings. One of the downsides to technology is, although we develop a way we can conduct these hearings, it can be a little silent. We have to always remember to make sure we provide public access. We have continued oral argument remotely. It's had its hiccups. I did an article in this upcoming bar bulletin on it. But we've been able to continue oral argument. The appeals court is more suited for remote. I can remote in, although I come into the office quite a bit. But my clerks can certainly remote in. District courts, it's a little more difficult to do. You have more staff surrounding with the court monitors and the bailiffs and those sorts of things. So I personally, I come in when I can. I have a young child that has done remote learning and looks like in Santa Fe is going to have to do it again. So I will be home contributing to that and doing my part, and that will require some work from home. But our court has not changed other than the remote oral arguments. So it would be interesting to hear people's views that have appeared in district courts and how the trial courts are managing. But we've had to change procedures. We didn't want a whole lot of time wasted on fights over exhibits. So one of the rules we amended was on dangerousness hearings or preliminary hearings, if you're going to have disputes over exhibits, you need to exchange your exhibits beforehand and send them to the judge so they can be published by the judge electronically. And now with the courts reopening, we've required every district court to submit a safety plan to us that we have to approve, which includes both safety issues, public access issues, and how they are literally going to run a jury trial down to things like bench conferences. You can't go up and have a bench conference with the court anymore. How are you going to manage that? So it is like, apologize if you heard me say it before, it's like building an airplane while you're flying it. And I didn't go to engineering school, right? So I'm equipped to read and study the law and write. I believe I'm fully capable to handle difficult legal issues. what we have discovered is we need to be capable of making sure that the justice system continues to run. And so there's going to be hiccups, but we're doing our best.
I've had a couple hearings in district court via Google Meets. They were early on and went relatively smoothly. I do a lot of guardianship work, so that's a bit difficult when you have incapacitated people,
Right.
Who don't really know what's going on. But I've got a hearing next week with about 7 or 8 parties, so I'm anxious about the hearing generally, but then we'll see how it goes doing it remotely through Google Meets. But I feel confident that the judges will be able to handle it.
Well, for those of you that are doing these, I welcome feedback on this stuff. A lot of it is coming top down. We've sort of forced them into the Meets platform because the court platform is a Google platform. But we're going to start experimenting with Zoom. I think probably with regard to guardianship, for example, there's certain advantages of Zoom with regard to breakout rooms that may be more attractive for certain types of hearings. So we're going to try and roll out and expand some of the remote platforms. And it's funny. I always, as a trial court judge, whenever before any trial at pre-trial, I said you need to make sure you understand the technology in the courtroom, because nothing will look worse to a jury than when you're up here trying to publish an exhibit, and the first had a pretty nice electronic display system, an advanced Elmo, and these folks are just messing around with it. I mean, the jury, you could see them right off the bat. Well, now you find out how much judges don't know about technology, and it's been a whole job just to try and educate them. So let us know how it goes and give me some feedback.
Great, thank you, Justice. So Brianna had another question, and this was on my list of questions, is the judicial nominating process always seems like a mystery. Can you tell us a bit about your experience of going through the nominating process, being appointed, and then dealing with an election, which we know you're currently running for election now?
It is a mystery, and it shouldn't be a mystery. And it's the other part that, Allison, when we get going on the judicial extern program, the next step in that is a pipeline to the judiciary, and I want young lawyers to be thinking about that now. Don't think about it when they issue the vacancy notice. Think about it now. And the reason is, Brianna's point is, there are things that are just, you only confront once in your career, and one is this nominating process. And it requires an application and then this interview in front of a large group of people. And they send your name up to the governor. If they deem you qualified, they send your name up to the governor. Then the governor appoints. That's a whole different process, right? Depending on who the governor is. And then you stand for an election one time after the appointment. So now I'm up in 2020. In November, I'll be on the ballot. But I had the advantage when I came here. I'd done that in the first judicial. I'd gone through the nominating commission process. I'd interviewed with the governor. I'd served as core. I'd actually run an election in the first. And you can tell those that are not prepared. On the nominating commission itself, it's in my view, a very crucial part of the process. I think it sort of serves the way, if you look at the federal system, the Senate should be working, which is you sort of vet candidates for their qualifications. So unless you come out of the nominating commission, you're not deemed qualified. It doesn't keep you from running. They can do that, but I think it's a good check. But you are interviewing in front of 19 people, depending on how many people apply. You have 20 minutes, and you're trying to get your story across very quickly. And just like you all moot your oral arguments, you know, people should moot out their interviews in front of the nominating commission. But think about this stuff now. So, and you know, she's been on a number of them. She's probably as helpful as I am. But you know, look, what do I need? You know, and I'm happy to do this. If you collect your resumes and you want to meet, and this is part of my clerkship program. You know, Justice, what do I need on here to assist in being a more attractive candidate to the nominating commission? And one, quite frankly, is what you're doing here, which is participating with the state bar. Okay. And that does two things. One, it builds a network where you're going to meet other competent, interested lawyers, and those people are more likely than not going to serve on the nominating commission. You're going to serve the bar. And when you're interviewed with the governor, at least Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham asked me, what are you going to do to advance the bar? Well, you know, great, you're going to be a judge, justice. What are you going to do to help lawyers out and help the bar out? And so, you know, that's one thing I always suggest to people, you know, get more involved in the bar, improve, and this will go right to one of her questions, improve, you know, what do you do on the community side? She often asks that question in nominating commissions. It's a good question. You know, what do you do to support your community? What are your interests outside of being a lawyer? But really, really think about that stuff. You know, the other thing you can do, which no one does, is contact the bar. Contact Justice Michael V. Hill and say, I really would like to sit on one of these commissions. So you can see the view from the commission side. Maybe you can't do that. Then the next vacancy, go watch one. Go sit in the back. You don't have to sit there all day. They're open. Listen to the questions that are being asked. Those are all things you can do. Now, the last thing on the nominating commissions themselves, the only real issue I have with the nominating commission is they are built off of state bar lists. And it used to be, and I don't know if this is true, you have to volunteer for it. And I think I was trying to get them at least to opt out. And I don't know if we changed that form or not. Meaning, unless you check it, you're going to be on the list. But what it requires is additional efforts towards racial and gender diversity. And it's not always easy to discern from these lists those factors. So if you reach out to the bar or you reach out to Justice V. Hill and say, you know, next time these things are being compiled, I would like to serve, that would help us out. But I think they're really good. Everybody's always, it's like watching a jury. They're very professional. They know what their job is. I have not seen any real, you know, politics does not enter into it. I think it's a crucial process that could use some improvement.
Was there anything in the process that surprised you the first time around that you just that you weren't prepared for?
Yeah. And this was true in the election, and it's going to sound, I don't want this to sound the wrong way. You really think more people know you than do? Especially if you're from Santa Fe. So I'm born and raised in Santa Fe. I'm like, Santa Fe High, play basketball. Everybody, my family's here. You know, my mom taught school. Yeah, that's not true. It's just not true. Because there's so much change, and you know, you get out of your own world. So you have to remember when you're, you know, telling your story, that you know, you have to refamiliarize people sometimes with sort of the core parts of why you want to do, why you want to be a judge. So that was, and then that, you know, same with the election. I mean, this town is changing quite a bit anyway, but I found in my first election, it certainly wasn't the town I grew up in. And I sort of took it for granted that, well, people are going to know who I am. They don't. You have to work at getting that out. So I would say that was probably the biggest surprise. And then when I did the one for the New Mexico Supreme Court, it was such a big panel, and I thought, and I didn't have much time, and I thought, I'm not gonna be able to get out anything of relevance. And there were some folks on the panel, like, there's going to be some sharp knives coming out. But you know what? It was all very. They just do a professional job. They just focus on what their job is, and I think it's a real credit.
I know just with family members for elections, they seem to know candidates that are running for legislature or city council, but they never know the judicial candidates. And they always ask me or my husband who they should vote for the judicial candidates. So I think it's just something, maybe that's something the bar needs to work on, to just expose more of the candidates so people are making more informed decisions. So how has your life changed since becoming a judge and or a justice, either professionally or
Yeah,
personally?
I think it's really something to consider. And I think you said you're an introvert, as am I, and it's good for those people because it's very isolating. And uh, it's not only isolating for me. You have to have a real conversation with your family and your partners in your life and say, um, uh, this is something, you know, I would like to do, but this is something we need to talk about because here are the consequences. And you really need to take into consideration that. And it's a good deal of pressure. I think a lot of people look at the judiciary and, they maybe because of some of the egos involved. Um, Being a judge is hard and it's a lot of stress. You talked about why do you want to become a judge? I said, well, I'd like to fulfill the role of the neutral. Well, fulfilling the role of the neutral means you've got to make some hard decisions sometimes that affect people's lives, and it's just what you have to do. And it's not over aggrandizement. It's just the amount of pressure you feel in doing it. And a guardian situation, for example, when I had those guardianship cases, um, you're taking a person's liberty and they may not understand why.
Mhm.
And you are literally, uh, and not even in the, I shouldn't say not even in, different from the criminal sense, where there is a societal purpose for why that is occurring. You're taking someone's liberty because they don't have the capacity to make decisions safely for themselves. And they want to, and you often see them in transition between those two things, and they have enough awareness that they want to express their independence, but they can't execute on their independence. It's not safe for them, and uh, you have to make those decisions, and it can be very stressful. And then you make the decision. Someone's always upset by it. Um,
Mhm.
Public pressure on it. You compound that with, maybe 2 years you're either running for election or retention. It changes your life quite a bit. Um, but it's also very rewarding in a lot of ways. And so I think if you go into it with open eyes and say, I have a thick enough skin to, take the arrows and make the decisions. I think it's a career worth thinking about, but it's a fishbowl, a kind of permanent quarantine, I guess. It's very isolating.
So would you say your workload has increased compared to when you were in private practice? Just so we can get an idea, maybe can you tell us what a typical day is like for you?
So if you're interested in the trial court, I'll separate the two.
Okay.
But here's what I loved about private practice. If you're thinking, I'm going to stay in private practice, or for those of you that if you're with the state or maybe you're thinking about the state. When I was in private practice, what I loved about private practice is I controlled my schedule and I got paid directly for what I did. So if I was something, I was compensated for it. And I was compensated better than I was as a state employee, quite frankly. Like if you're just going to go on value, it's market driven, right? And things like vacation with my family. I could work around scheduling so I could carve out time. The interesting thing about trial court and actually my work at the AG's office is you're sort of at the whim of your scheduling's at the whim of other entities, either courts or here or was at the trial court. My schedule was defined by when my jury dockets were set. I had to have hearings in a certain amount of time on certain things. And I was a trial court judge, so my calendar's built 2 years in advance. If I have a 16B, I used to have a scheduling conference. I expected you to go to trial in a year and a half at the outset. And for me to expect that of you, I had to keep you on track, which meant handle all the hearings and the discovery stuff. So you have a lot more freedom in private practice than you do as a judge. The workload itself, as busy as I was in private practice, I was busier as a trial court judge. Now that's not true in every district. So if you have young lawyers from around the state, if you examine what your local courthouse is like, it may not be as bad. Our dockets were huge and the litigation was pretty complex. I worked harder, probably. I've worked hard even at the AG's office. I mean, I've worked hard my whole life. I worked hardest as a trial court judge. And the last thing about a trial court judge different from both of those is I felt like I was committing malpractice all the time because when I was in private practice, I could focus on my subject matter. Like, okay, I'm gonna be a hearing officer for a while with Department of Health or whatever I did, and I could understand that area. Or I'm gonna be going to guardianships, so I can understand that. As a trial court, you're going from easements to product liability to a constitutional question about marijuana licenses, and you're just like, I cannot be. I need to have a firm understanding of each of these areas of law, and it was very, very difficult. The other thing about trial court is even though I had a bunch of colleagues in the first judicial, I never saw them. I see more of my colleagues here than I did because I was so busy managing my docket. We'd go in and out of court, go back to my chambers, work on something, I'd go back into court. I was in court all the time. Here, it is as much work, but it's distilled down to a number of cases that are just really complicated. As you know, having clerked, you're just peeling things back. And so you have to focus on the one or two cases and really, they're up here for a reason. And so the hours are about the same. The other difference is half of the time is a lot of administrative stuff and handling a lot of the COVID. And that is, early in the morning till late at night, depending on the crisis. I would go into court. When I was a trial court judge, I'd open Odyssey, get a sense of my schedule, and there would be 12, 18, 20 cases on there.
Wow.
Next day I would come in, it'd be 20 different cases. Here, it's 12 of the same cases. But they're just very, very complicated. So if you're looking at appellate law, it's the ability to be by yourself, not interact with other people, look deeply into the record, study the law. If you're more interested in interaction and rapid decisions and a wider variety of things, there's district court. What I pitch to law students is the Court of Appeals is a wonderful place because everybody wants, well, people want to clerk in the Supreme Court, and we're all very nice, and it's nice. But the Court of Appeals, it's an appeal of right, so you get to see everything there. And if you're interested in appellate work and you want to be an appellate court judge, the Court of Appeals is a great place to work.
So Justice Thomson, Shasta Inman, who's an attorney in Albuquerque, she's also our YLD chair-elect. She has a question. Besides the COVID mess, what has been the thing that surprised you the most about being on the Supreme Court?
What has surprised me the most, I will give you good and I will give you bad. What should I start with? I'll start
Bad news is always good.
The quality of oral advocacy is very disappointing. It's very disappointing. The quality of writing is disappointing given where I sit now. Now, when I was in a trial court and briefs would come in, I'd read the briefs. I understood because I was in private practice and you have your 20-day deadline or 30-day and you're trying to knock a motion response out and there's errors and there's margin issues and my orders were not perfect. I tried to write when I could. But at this point, your act has to be together, and it makes a difference in the way a litigant understands the rules, writes, and then advocates to the court. And it's been surprisingly inadequate. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We are not the trial court, right? The record is made. The lies have been told. Don't come in and try and snow us. You can snow me as a trial court judge because I don't have a law clerk, right? So do I have the time and do I have the people who go through the entire record and you may try and get away with something there. I was always prepared. Here, you're not going to get away with it, and you're going to look bad. That's been, I think, one of the unfortunate surprises. The positive is, and it's similar to when I would watch how juries conducted themselves, both in voir dire and in litigation. It makes so much sense to have 5 justices. When you sit around after, and what we do is so for the benefit of those of you that may appear, we don't conference cases before oral argument. And that's why oral argument in New Mexico is crucial. Goes back to my original point. when I went to 10th Circuit, I knew that opinion was almost written. And I could argue the margins and maybe try, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. But that opinion was written. It came out soon after I argued. Here, we don't conference cases before. We conference them after. And so it really have benefited from the thoughts of my colleagues. I thought that'd be very frustrating as a district court judge because I'm like, I'm right. I made the decision on this, but I've really welcomed it. And you go in on a particular issue, and they'll ask a question that you didn't think of. It's really it's an amazing process. So I've been pleasantly surprised by that. I also don't think I realized how heavy the administrative job was, and it just consumes a lot of time. So a lot of my writing is done weekends and in the evenings when after court decisions have to be made. So those are the two things, sort of the good and the bad.
On those same points about lawyers presenting in front of you, are there any skills or strategies young lawyers can start working on to be great advocates and just be better lawyers and be able to effectively present their case in front of you?
Yeah, and when I first started arguing either at the trial court or up here, the nice thing about the AG's office when I was there, we had this writ system in New Mexico. Like you can come to the Supreme Court on anything, right? Mandamus, superintendent control. And back then, they would allow argument on a lot of this stuff. And I still now here, I try and urge argument as much as we can on them because I think it's a nice thing about New Mexico. It gives lawyers the opportunity to litigate. Really be in tune to what the judge or justice is asking. Your outline is important, and you need to get your points out on behalf of your client, and that is crucial. You want to, at the trial court, you want to make your record, but make your record and then see what the court is interested in. My questions are not geared because I am skeptical of your case necessarily. I might be. I might also be trying to bolster your case because I know colleagues are going to come from a different view. So not every question is antagonizing. It seems like a lot of times they view it as, well, it's a question, so you immediately get defensive about it. That's not necessarily true. I would urge brevity and getting to your main points, and then seeing what the court has. What is of interest to the court? Now, you may not have a curious judge, and that's unfortunate, or a judge that's prepared, and that is also unfortunate. But I hope most of them are, and that if you address the questions, that'll be the most effective way to advocate for your client.
And are there opportunities that young lawyers should look out for if they're interested in becoming a judge or a justice?
There are, and I think we will do. Hopefully, if I survive November, how far? Is it 4 months? What is it? 3.5?
Yeah, 3.5.
Should have an atomic clock. What we're going to build through the state bar is sort of a pipeline to the judiciary, so we can have conversations with state bar members and one of the nice things about, again, the work I did when I was at the AGs, I was often defending judges on writs. So someone would take a writ on mandamus on a court, and then the AG, if it was a jurisdictional issue, the AG would represent them. Well, what that allowed me to do is just have conversations with judges about what they do, and that's a very simple thing to do, and judges love it because we don't get to interact with, certainly we don't, you know. So if you called and said, Justice Vigil, Justice Barbara, Justice Nakamura, Justice Bacon, Dave, tell me, what it's like, and they'll be more than happy to do it. If you're in the second and you call Nancy Franchini or Brett Lovelace or Whitaker, they'll do it, and that's a very simple way. The other is, like I said, you see one of these vacancies. If you at all aspire to it, and you see a vacancy, you say that's not right for me right now. That doesn't mean you put it aside until you see the next one. Go to that nominating commission, watch how it's done. Talk to people that have served on those nominating commissions. What are you looking for? Go talk to the judges. What is it like? And then build your resume around that. You think maybe, for example, you're too heavy civil and you're going to get a question about, well, you have no criminal experience, you have no domestic relations experience. Well, you can do pro bono work. You can apply, at the federal level to be is it CJA? I forget what the acronym is for appellate counsel. There's things you can do to expand your practice areas to make yourself more attractive candidate. So I guess my main point would be explore it early.
Great, thanks, Justice Thomson. I think I've got one more question before we finish, but I want to throw it out to our participants and see if anyone else has any questions for you. So if you do, you can just type anything into the chat box and then I can ask that to Justice Thomson. So I guess this is kind of a fun question. Do you recommend any books or podcasts, for example, to lawyers or aspiring judges?
I do. Hold on.
Allison, it's Brianna. I think we should.
So what?
No.
Oh, sorry. Who's asking?
All right, I think that was Brianna.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Justice Thomson how difficult it is to run a campaign for in the midst of COVID. How do you actually go out and meet people and tell them to vote for you if you can't go out and meet people?
It's really hard. As Allison mentioned, it's hard to penetrate. I mean, we're considered down ballot, and we're not. We're statewide, and I'm sitting behind every county commissioner at because people want to know whether they're going to fill potholes. They're like, and what do you do? What can you do for my ticket? I'm like, well, that's not the court I'm on. I'm on the highest, Well, where is that? Well, it's the one that's across from Del Chato. And then they always say, well, I hope I never see you. So how are you supposed to get votes from people that say, I hope I never see you? Now, here's the other side of it. We'll go anywhere. I'll go anywhere and talk. It doesn't necessarily have to be political. I will sell the importance of the judiciary. I will talk to civic organizations and schools about why you need to pay attention to the judiciary. One of the nice things about this whole COVID thing is we have now streamed oral argument from this court. We've had a lot of people listen to some of these high-profile cases, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from it. And what I tell them is, we just heard that election case, or we just heard that public health case. Do you think it was interesting? Yeah. Do you think it was, Important to listen to, yes. I said, the next day I heard whether or not a person's going to serve life in prison. Just as important, just as interesting. And we've been able to get some additional exposure to the judiciary. So you just need to be patient with it. Reach out as much as you can through civic organizations, and do what you can. But it's not easy. Now you can see my bald head. Am I, being who I am, growing up in Santa Fe, it's not the best climate. So am I missing all the parades? It'd probably be a lot redder right now. I would like to do them. I'm not going to be able to do them, but I'll find other ways to communicate about the judiciary. So here's one. Has everyone read True Grit, Charles Portis? Anything by Charles Portis? You've probably heard of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I have it marked. Unbelievable writer, interesting little court scenes. And then every clerk I interview, I ask them what they're reading. And my current clerk, who I hired, was reading Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis. And so I look for I try and read more fiction, although I have biography of John Marshall over there. I think I'm on page 20. I'm reading biography on John Adams I'm enjoying. But I try and read more fiction, but really good writing.
Mm-hmm.
See at Dunce's. I like P.J. O'Rourke, Hunter S. Thompson. I just like interesting, succinct, and hopefully comedic writing. It's a little bit of a release.
Great. We've got one last question from Stephen Timmer. He's an attorney at the 13th Judicial DA's office. And he asks, what mistakes do you see attorneys make in their responses when an opposing counsel crosses a line, whether ethical or professional?
That's a great question. And I'm asked about that a lot. And a lot of it is in context of how frustrating it is for litigants to be confronted with that negative professional attitude or ethics and the judge do nothing. Usually that's what I hear, right? Why don't you guys hammer them? Why don't you come down and, be done with them? Here's why. We spend our lives trying to remove emotion from our decisions. I want my decision to be on the facts and the law, right? So when that stuff starts, my natural inclination as a judge is to, slow it down. And for the advocates, it's frustrating because the court's not intervening. I think, quite frankly, it's taking the bait. And it's not a criticism because you should be able to defend yourself. But when you take the bait and you engage back in that negative space, it's not advancing the interests of your client. You can still communicate to the court, this is what's going on. So let me tell you respectfully some of the mistakes counsel made with regard to citation to the record. Here it is, bing, bing, bing. Let me remind you, Judge, we're just here last month, and I know you've got a lot of cases, but we went through this, and they told me they were going to give me these documents, or they were going to do this. And they didn't. We did this, and you told them, Judge. Remind the court. The court gets it. They get it, but they're not going to be. They're not going to get down into the mud. And I know it's frustrating, but I think the biggest focus on what you need that judge to know. And if it is how horrible your opposing counsel is, I guess you can assert it. It's not going to advance your client's position that much. But you can reinforce to the court subtly what is going on, and they will get it. But it's a good question.
Great. With that, Justice Thomson and everybody, I think we're going to wrap up our lunch. Thank you, Justice Thomson, for spending your lunch hour with us and giving us some insight into what it's like to be a judge and a justice. We really appreciate your time. So the YLD is working on some other lunches with the judiciary, and we'll be providing that information to you. Justice Thomson, did you have some final thoughts?
I do.
Okay.
Oh, stay involved in the bar. I'm very glad you all are here and the tremendous job Allison does. And Team Cruz, they really do. And then they do a good job for you all. After YLD is over, stay involved. Get involved in the American Bar Association after this. It will reward your career. Again, if any of you want to talk to me separately on case related, contact my office and I'm happy to do it. Allison will be telling you more about the minority and disadvantaged law clerk program we're going to roll out and our pipeline to the judiciary. And finally, be safe and try and be nice to everybody because it's kind of different. All right?
Great. Thank you, Justice Thomson.
Thank you, Allison. Good to see you.